Hello, everyone. Catchy1383 with Catchy Gaming, and I played Splatoon Raiders, the single player game based off of, I guess, a horde mode from the Splatoon 1, 2, and 3 series. And I know they tried to do a single player thing for Splatoon 3, but I never bought the game just so I could do that. And this felt like a good opportunity to actually try the game because I do not care for multiplayer in any capacity, and I've long since stopped paying for Nintendo's online service and don't really feel like paying for it again just for Splatoon. And I'm pretty sure Nintendo was aware that people like me existed that probably wanted to play this game but didn't actually want to do nothing but multiplayer. So, what is Splatoon Raiders about? Well, I guess in a nutshell, to keep it simple, the three characters that you see here, Big Man, Fry, and Shiver, a trio of inklings from a music group that I think that's what they are. And they're pretty aware that a lot of people don't know who this group is. And when I say they, I mean Nintendo. They go through this whole entire joke of where the group introduces themselves to the mechanic, your character. And your character has no idea who these people are in terms of their celebrity status from their town, Splatsville. So, this group of raiders is looking to the island for treasure after it reappeared after some geological phenomenon of some kind, as well as finding a map in Big Man's house that's really old. On top of that, they're looking for gold and other sources of treasure because Splatsville is deeply in debt from all the Salmonoid invasions. And the copter that they are in ends up crashing and they're stuck in this sort of region of their world, which doesn't really make sense because you think you would tell people where you're going so that they would, you know, look for you if something happened, but I guess they didn't do that little part. So a month passes by that you don't get to experience in any capacity, and they have a boat with a working crane built out of scraps. Where they got the scraps, who knows? But as it turns out, and which was pretty obvious to guess what was going to happen, the pilot, who's also the mechanic, just so happens to be the character that you get to customize, sort of customize. The options for customizing your character are very limited. And for the life of me, I don't know if this is just like a thing with the Splatoon universe. Everybody is just kind of androgynous in terms of what sex they are. I mean, outside of one voice being maybe slightly deeper than the other, and the hairstyles are more or less work either way. I just, no matter what I did, I ended up just doing my best trying to get a character that looks relatively male. And don't get me wrong, yes, there's definitely some hairstyles that definitely lean into being more of a feminine side of things, but I think in general all of them do, and not so much male in other ways. Personally, it doesn't affect the game negatively. It just seems a little weird that they put such limited choices in this game. I don't know, maybe it's a Japanese thing. Someone would have to explain it to me, but I didn't really mind. It's the gameplay that matters to me. It also could just be the nature of how the whole Inkling world works. I don't know. I'm not gonna about to dive deep into the lore of Inkling appearances and stuff like that. So after designing your character, you get to go through tutorial land, where they kind of ease you into how the game controls and how the mechanics work. Fairly straightforward. You get a basic little ink blaster. You gain a level or two. You get to use the bot buddy abilities as well as other things. And lastly, you get to find a chest where you get the various tanks that you will use throughout the game that have different abilities, particularly the three tanks, that being speed, power, and tactical. Each of them have gadgets that you can attach to them that have different abilities or attacks that go with the tanks. Personally, I end up using the tactical tank the most and just absolutely loathe the speed tank. But after the introduction of those tanks, they introduced the next element of the story where there's this fog that covers up most of the archipelago that makes up the map of the game. It's called Spiralite Island or something like that. It's called Spiralite Archipelago because it's a series of islands. And you progress through the story by defeating various enemies, which causes these pipes that pump out the fog to stop. And you progress to various different islands, causing the fog to stop as you go along, trying to get to the center of the island. Now, this is where I found out how they're more or less keeping the player in check from going out of bounds, more or less. And that's making it so that the Inklings, although they're squid and octopus like beings, can't swim. I don't know if they explained why. I might have missed it. They can't get into the water, but it'll cause almost instant death if you have health and you step into the water, which will bring up that danger bar. And if you touch the water again when you have the danger bar, you are dead. And if you see in that top left hand corner there, those are your lives. You get three per raid. I don't know how that works with the multiplayer elements in the game. They also started introducing newer weapons into the game. This particular one was supposed to be a long rifle or sniper rifle, which usually is what I go for when I play games. But this, although yes, it penetrates and has a very decently long ink trail, I just found it unsatisfying to use, along with actually in pretty much most of the weapons in the game. I mean, particularly the sniper rifle was probably my most disappointing because its range is just absolutely pitiful. And the tactical packs has this thing where it's like, yeah, you can do more damage to range salmonoids, but I don't know what that range looks like because the range on the sniper rifle like weapon is incredibly short. And it's one of the reasons why it just wasn't satisfying to use. I mean, if they're gonna balance it out, have a longer distance, don't leave an ink trail behind it though. And I'll touch more on the weapons in a little bit here. But at this next particular part is where they introduce the other part of the story and sort of mechanic as well. So at the end of various raids, you do get treasure chests. Some of them just have weapons, materials, the spiralite ore that you need to upgrade weapons, and story element treasures for all intents and purposes that are used to help pay off the debt of Splatsville. But they also have a different function than just providing you monetary gain on top of increasing the yield of spiralite ore. They also unlock abilities that you can equip to your character or bonuses as well. Like you can add a double jump to your character, or you can make it so that they recover ink faster while they're in their ink form and in a puddle of their own ink. After you get your first treasure chest with actual treasure in it, you get to explore the boat and you get to go to the mechanics table where you can upgrade your mechanics abilities by leveling up. You get one little point that you can apply to basically different aspects of the mechanic to increase your mechanics abilities and or damage. It's the RPG element of the game. And then I would be remiss to not mention I found this more or less crane game and then I totally forgot about it. It even existed up until I watched this footage. It really didn't do much. I mean, I got a few materials and a few spiralite ore. It wasn't fun or enjoyable in any capacity. That's probably why I never bothered with it after I messed around for maybe 5 minutes. I do want to mention one thing. It definitely pushes you towards a Nintendo subscription, prompting you to play online with other people, which sounds like it's potentially fun, but I'm pretty sure I just play with a bunch of randos, which on occasion I'm okay with, but in general, I just avoid playing with people I just don't know. And you can blame anybody who's a meta player for that. I'm looking at you, Overwatch players, you bunch of group of numbnuts. So after ignoring the whole entire thing where I could play online but still naming my character because they pretty much forced it on you, I move on with the game. And we're technically still in tutorial land. They're holding your hand a lot at the beginning of the game. They kind of hide it a little well, but not. But I think they kind of do you a bit of a disservice by making it as simple and easy in order to get the explanation across. And one thing I wanted to mention, because if anyone's paying attention, my ink color is not consistent in any capacity. That's because there's a setting that has three different choices. You can turn the lock on or off, which will randomize what color ink you get, or you can have it pink or blue. Personally, I don't know why they didn't have you go with a custom ink color. That's one of the things I was kind of disappointed with, is that they didn't let me choose what ink color I wanted to use, which they could have tied it to your hair color. Uh, I don't know. Is it hair tentacle color? Let's go with tentacle color. I mean, personally, it seems like an obvious thing to do, but they just didn't do that. So eventually, after you unlock a bunch of other weapons based on leveling up and progressing through the various little islands, you finally get to your first boss. And a lot of these salmonoids have like food flavor theme to their names, like Flappetizer. And there's like giant forks and other things in the foreground, if you've noticed. And I almost thought like this might be tied to Pikmin in some weird, devastating way. Like when you go into the world of Pikmin, you just find all this scrap everywhere. I mean, it could be they're just so tiny and there's just so much scrap everywhere you would potentially never see a human. But I'm getting kind of post apocalyptic vibes from the game. And a new species has taken over the planet as the dominant species, and life has just changed its form as a result of whatever occurrences happened to humanity. I mean, I'm probably exceptionally wrong on that, but that's just me. After beating the boss, a projector from like a planetarium drops down, and you get to talk to Shiver. And I guess I didn't mention this, but in typical Nintendo fashion, the characters don't use any dedicated language. They just have their weird noises they call language. I mean, a lot of the times, like people's doing lines in English and then they play them backwards or something like that. Here, I'll just let Shiver speak for a little bit. And I guess I forgot to mention that little suit of armor that you found. It's the key to the whole entire thing of them progressing through the whole entire map, where it points out where different bits of treasure are. And in this case, it had a clue where it says you have to sing in the right key to unlock something. I can't remember what exactly. It didn't say that specifically. It was a little bit more cryptic, but it was obviously meant to be singing in the right key instead of just an actual key, causing the projector to turn on, and it has a pattern in the sky depicting a bunch of salmonoids going around the archipelago towards a tower, which then causes a part of this door to light up. I mean, honestly, I don't know why they have this door in the game because by the time you get to the end of it, it feels like they forgot about the door. Now, I haven't completed the game 100%. That door could come into play later, particularly because I'm in the meta part of the game. But when you see it this part and you get to the obvious third part that's going to happen, you don't see anything with the door. So I don't know. I'm guessing if there's anything left with the door, it's in the meta. Now, let's talk about the weapons in the game. Some of them just don't get the job done and just aren't fun to use, at least in my opinion. Like I said, the sort of sniper rifle and its variations, it just wasn't satisfying to use. Its range was just way too short to be anything I would consider even viable or even worthwhile. And then you have other weapons like this one. It's just a bucket. It's not satisfying to use in any shape or form. And I pretty much forgot how to use it. I just went back to capture footage. But no, I did not like this particular weapon. But then we have other guns like the minigun, where again, you take something that should be fun to use, but you slow it down in some shape or form to balance out the game, and it just doesn't make it fun or satisfying to use. And you have the umbrella gun here, which I'm pretty sure came from the Kingsman movie. It I never really used it in combat. I thought it was more of a gimmick. Again, it might have its uses because I'm guessing that's a shield, but I never took it into combat because I was like, I'm fine. One weapon I did actually kind of like a little bit was the chainsaw sword. I mean, it's not a chainsaw, but it's a chainsaw. I found that a little bit on the fun side to use. Still too slow for my taste, though, particularly again for the meta. And I know I made fun of meta earlier, but in this case, yeah, due to the nature of the meta, a lot of these weapons just don't feel like they work very well. And then you have the bow, which you would think would be a little bit more powerful than it actually is, but it's not. Again, you have run into the issue of it just being slow. Like any meaningful damage you can get out of it, it just takes too long. And I suspect part of this is they are kind of sort of pushing you towards that online play. So you get other players that sort of help you make up for the lack of damage that you might not do with some of these weapons. Now, I do have a couple of automatic weapons that are nice and fun to use, but they just don't do enough damage in a wide enough arc. Which brings me to the one weapon I have been using pretty much since I was able to get my hands on one, and that's the paintbrush. And that's for one simple reason. Of all the weapons that they have, this one is the fastest. It helps you move faster in the ground. You can attack faster with it. It has a wide area of attack, which is pretty much necessary, particularly when you get to the end of the game. Now, there's probably things I could do to make these other weapons work better, but the way you have to invest materials and other resources into leveling up particular weapons, it feels like you only have resources for one, and I went with the paintbrush as a result. All the other weapons are just too slow in movement. They don't cover enough area in ink, which also slows down the salmonoids. which also helps with survival. If you take too much damage, you can go into the ink to speed away or help recharge your ink or health bar faster. It just feels like an all around much better weapon in comparison to all the others. So let's move on from weapons to talking about bot buddies. So each member of that particular crew, deep cut, can be inside that little mech that follows you around. And each member has an ability called a showstopper. It varies from character to character. Shiver here launches her giant ass shark at the enemy, and as you increase your bond with it, it becomes more powerful and adds more effects to it. Fry launches a storm of moray eels. It's my second favorite of the showstoppers. It does a lot of AoE damage in a very concentrated area. And Big Man, which is my favorite because it has the most mobility and allows me to focus on either groups or one enemy in specific. He shoots out little rays and tornadoes that can damage groups of enemies or just one enemy in particular. I do actually have a tendency to use my tank abilities because I'm spamming the left and right shoulder buttons. So this next part contains spoilers and a correction. Okay, I want to update something because I was going through the footage to find the story elements, and I finally found that door. And I guess, yeah, they do show the door again. I just totally forgot that they did because of how insignificant it more or less was to the whole entire story. In particular, because you come across that shiny object at the beginning of the game that they were attracted to, which then causes them to crash, is a giant power egg. And it floats down into a crevice in the ground before it arrives at the bottom of this pit, which doesn't make sense why the door was there, but it was floating above the pit. I don't know. It doesn't matter. So, yeah, the giant golden thing that they thought was treasure turns out to be a giant power egg. And when you beat the third boss that is with Big Man, it's pretty obvious what you're going to fight. It's a very large tri-headed salmonoid. So this particular fight against this giant salmonoid reminded me a lot of Final Fantasy Rebirth's ending, where you had to fight a very giant monster in it, and with a bunch of just platforms floating everywhere. I don't know if that was on purpose, but it feels eerily similar to it. And like all the other boss fights, you power up the drill by gathering the power eggs that you get from killing the salmonoids. And then you just smack it in the face with the pointy end of the drill. Although I'm talking about the last boss of the game, I think this is an appropriate point to talk about the platforming in the game. It's more or less slow and absolutely terrible. You have a very short jump. Yes, you have ways to increase your jump, like you turn into your inkling form, allows you to jump just a little bit farther, or you can call whatever bot buddy you have over, you can jump off of that. But it's slow. It's really slow, and it's just kind of impractical to use. And I don't know. It just doesn't feel like this game was designed to have platforming in it. At least not like large bits of it, because it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't really work. It feels extremely forced, kind of like fitting a square peg into a round hole kind of deal. But this final battle with the giant salmonoid has plenty of platforming in it. And let's just say 2 out of the 4 instances I had to do it, I fell off. And I mean, it was extremely generous. Didn't take away a life or anything and just let me continue as if nothing happened. Anyways, after you get back up to the crane control where you use controls like where you use that whole entire mini game thing. Oddly enough, that actually came into play. You attach the drill to the crane by grabbing it and you fling it into his face. But then he comes back and forms an even bigger drill with his head, which this results in a cinematic ending that I think Nintendo is just growing way too fond of. I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it reminds me a lot of Donkey Kong Returns when he punches the moon to kill the bad guy. But yeah, do a whole drill on drill action scene here. And it's not just a cutscene. You have to do a full on rotate the left analog stick. Why the left analog stick? I have no idea. Considering an overwhelming majority of people are right handed, but they're like, yeah, left hand joystick. So I'm sitting there doing my best Mario Party impersonation without, drilling a hole in my hand, thankfully, wiggling it around to push this thing back in order to beat the game. And I'm not entirely sure how much effort you had to put into this, but it feels like you actually had to put some effort into making sure you rotated that analog stick enough, which I kind of am irritated by, not by the mechanic of it, but mainly because of the wear and tear that it could potentially put on your controller. Although short, not a fan of doing that much effort and putting that much strain on my controller in a short little bit of time. But once you actually push on through, you get another one of those cinematic cutscenes that, like I said, it seems that Nintendo has become very fond of using when it comes to into their games, piercing the giant Seminoid and causing it to blow up. And with that, the credits roll. But that's not the end of the game. Like I said, there's a meta game, and they add a super spicy difficulty to the game. And this makes the game legitimately hard in comparison to everything that came before it. Like, even just the spicy wasn't a problem. Instead of doing what they typically do, is they hide their difficulty behind objectives. Like, let's say you go through a Mario game, easiest difficulty, you just complete the level. You do something harder, they add like a collectible to get along the way as you complete the level. The highest difficulty is collecting all the collectibles, and they add various difficulties to collecting said collectibles. This, they did not hide behind that. They just added the difficulty level to it. But there is such a huge gap between spicy and super spicy. This is where grinding actually becomes a thing in the game. And one thing I particularly notice are the size of the hit boxes in this game. Most of the time you just sort of get away with it, but in this, holy cow, they're the size of Texas. Like, you could graze by, you'll see a gap, you'll just go through the gap, but no, those hit boxes are so huge that you'll end up being bounced back into something, and you'll end up just absolutely being devastated. Several of these levels, just for a single gem that randomly drops from powerful enemies to be earned by completing the raid, is just absolutely a daunting task, and it doesn't make any sense to do it other than to say I can do it. I mean, with enough tries and practices and strategizing, I was eventually able to actually do a couple of these, but some of them, like, they're all the way up to level 80. And the amount of time and resources it takes to gather to upgrade your weapons and equipment, it's just, I don't know if it's actually worth the time to get that far so I could do the level 80 spicy stuff. I mean, I managed to eke by on one particular level for doing it, but there's multiple, just multiple areas where Yeah, it's not on 80, but they're super hard, mainly because they just throw one specific kind of enemy at you. The other part of the meta that I forgot to mention is that it unlocks these little areas where you have to use each specific tank in order to beat the scenario. And when you beat each particular scenario with said represented tank, you unlock a portion of a treasure. And there's a point to those treasures. But this particular part I didn't really care for because I absolutely just hated the speed tank. I mean, it just to me it yeah, it had some mobility, but it doesn't really help in terms of supporting. It just feels so much weaker and less useful than the other two. I mean, you can pull yourself up to higher ledges with some of the abilities or jump to different areas, but it just doesn't feel all that great to use. And it took far more effort to actually be able to put out enough damage while using the speed tank in comparison to the power tank or even the strategic tank. But it has three separate raids that use each tank, and eventually you do combine all three together, totaling for three different treasures, which they increase in value with every piece that you find, and they're all cooking instruments. Oddly enough, I'm not entirely sure why they chose that, but that's what they went with. And once you get all three said treasures, you go to a particular room that was underneath the temple where the giant power egg went, and you put all three of the golden cooking instruments on these gold light pedestal, and it opens up a tunnel to the bottomless pit, known as the bottomless buffet. Actually, it's still a pit as far as I'm concerned, where it seems to be just a series of short little raids that you go through, and you can get treasure every 3 levels. Now, I don't know if said treasure is random or not. I have very little footage of the bottomless buffet. I just didn't bother recording, and I started focusing on trying to max out my character's abilities. I made that decision after going through the first 3 levels of the bottomless buffet and just absolutely getting rocked, barely scraping by on my second try after spending a few resources here and there to upgrade stats. And it was just barely enough, but I was still just getting devastated by the salmonoids. I mean, it's mainly through the sheer number of them and the pure amount of AoE they just absolutely just throw at you. And this was just a preview. Like I said, they added the super spicy, but they increased the level like significantly. It's just not like 30, 40, 45. It goes like 50, 55, 60, and I'm only like in the first third. And right now, I can get through maybe level 60s with all the stuff that I spent, but it's just absolutely hard. It requires definitely a lot of thought and skill put into just making it through these various scenarios just to be alive, let alone make it through all three of them. And that's when I particularly, like I said, started trying to focus on improving my character and maxing on his stats. And there's one thing I forgot to mention because I just didn't capture any footage of it until like the very end of the game. And that's when you find these compasses from completing raids. Most of them were just in treasure boxes as you completed the game. But you found most of the compasses in crates on the various levels that you went through. If you were willing to explore, they rewarded you, which is nice. And you also gained engineering points as you leveled up to level 50, but it's not enough to get everything up to its max. That's where these really hard dungeons come into place and you get these compasses. So, what do these compasses do? Well, they appear at the top of the map screen and they point to a specific part of the map. And when you find said specific part of the map, you hit the A button and you unlock a challenge. These challenges involve using various equipments depending on which tank you are using. Or I should say, they use a pre assigned tank. And there's two of them that just don't have any tanks. They expect you to get through them without the use of any particular strategic weapon or tank or anything like that. It's to test your knowledge and abilities with the mechanics of the game. So these are definitely harder than the other challenges. Oh, I take that back. The tactical pack, I keep calling it strategic, but whatever. The purple one, that one was embarrassingly easy in comparison to the power and the speed packs that you have to go through. Those took multiple tries. The tactical pack, it took me one because it was just that easy. But the other two, you have to pop these balloons in a certain amount of time. And you can't just like, hey, I popped all the balloons, I'm good. No, you have to have enough time left to make it to the book in the center or wherever it is in the other areas before time runs out. Because if time runs out and you don't touch that book, you do not get the book. You can pop all the balloons. If you do not touch that book, you are absolutely screwed. Which happened a couple of times to me when I was completing these. I was like, oh. Now, the challenge that took me the most tries to complete was the speed tank challenge. And it's pretty obvious why, especially when I said I absolutely hated the speed tank and developed almost zero skill with the particular gadgets that you can use with the speed tank. So it took quite a few tries to actually get this one, far more than it did with the power or the tactical pack. Well, like I said, the tactical pack was just one try. This one, it drove me up the wall. I mean, the other part about it is I'm sort of wondering, like, what upgrades for the gadgets am I not finding, and how do I get a hold of them? Because you can absolutely make some devastating things. Didn't know you could do some devastating things with the said gadgets, like having three of these spinny boomerang things here. Didn't know you could do that. Mainly because I haven't found the upgrade for it. I don't know if it's just pure chance, or do I have to progress through specific raids to actually find it? I don't know. They don't explain it. The other part is I don't know if this is just something they did specially for these challenges. They gave them these upgrades that you won't see in the main game. It's just for these challenges. I don't know. But I was finally able to upgrade my character completely, although that 400% addition to HP, it doesn't really make that much of a difference because of how much damage the Salmonoids do on the harder difficulties. So this is the part where I'm gonna kind of vent some frustrations with the game, and that's in particular when it comes to some of the things that happen when you play the game. So, for instance, I'm fairly confident that they were trying to push me towards doing this in multiplayer so that I would pay for a monthly subscription in order to make it easier. I'm not entirely sure of that, but it feels like that's what they were doing. But I am a firm believer that if you want to know what's wrong with your game mechanically, you should play your game on the hardest difficulty and see what's wrong with it. Like what feels unfair about the gameplay, stuff like that. And Splatoon and its meta definitely has its issues. And particularly when you come into tight little spaces and you are absolutely surrounded by enemies, the camera just goes absolutely ballistic. You can't see a thing because it makes you go transparent. It makes the things around you go transparent. And there's so many things that you absolutely cannot see what is going on and then react to it in any capacity. And I find it exceptionally frustrating. The other thing is, and this is just in general, I don't particularly like it when all they do to increase difficulty is to increase the amount of damage they do as well as increase their hit points. I find it somewhat lazy. I mean, I kind of get it because that's just how you can do it on a very basic level, but I just I just don't like it when that's all they do. But in this case, that's what they did, but they also just cranked up the number of enemies on the screen up to 50. And that's part of what provides the difficulty for the raids. And there is one particular thing that drives me up the wall, and I don't know if anybody saw it, but you have these little towers that shoot rays of muck at you. Now, my particular issue is if you're ever slowed in any capacity, those things will not miss, like at all. They will absolutely hit you and slow you down even more. And it's just absolutely ridiculous. What's worse is they shoot through walls. Like you cannot take cover from them. They will track you through walls and they will absolutely make it difficult to climb up and get to wherever you need to defeat these little tower salmonoid things. And if there's one thing that absolutely drives me nuts when it comes to what I would consider lazy game design, it's just making them super accurate, like ridiculously accurate. Yeah, I mean, there's a place for that, but in order to make your game artificially difficult instead of, I don't know, making your various little NPCs that are attacking you a little bit harder to kill, maybe make them do something else other than just absolutely mob you and be super accurate. But I don't know, it just drove me up the wall fighting these things. And there's like one particular raid where you fight nothing but these little towers. And it's not this one, but this particular floor does have them. But it's just absolutely annoying that you have to fight these things. All right. That's enough of me griping. There's probably a couple other things, but those were the ones that are just, I don't know, come to the forethought when I'm making this video of what I found wrong with this particular bit of gameplay, and it's mainly on the harder difficulty. Which, yeah, like I said, it's just how they make games harder is increasing their hit points and how much damage they do, which is pretty standard, but I feel like they could have done something else, made them smarter instead of just swarming you and bombarding you with AoE attacks. But overall, the game is fun. The game is actually really fun, surprisingly fun. I mean, yes, I only use the paintbrush. There's probably other people who like other weapons more than that. If you haven't bought this game and you're looking at it, I would recommend it. I mean, there's also online multiplayer if that is your thing. I haven't tried it, so I can't speak to the quality of it, but it might be worth a peek to see what that's like. Now, the story isn't exactly anything complicated, and some people might have some issues with the part where you're taking Samanoid treasures and selling it in order to pay off the debt of Splatsville, which was devastated by the Samanoids. That's a whole mess. I'm not touching that with a 9 foot pole. But the overall gameplay is enjoyable, particularly if you get up to the boss, and if you just don't care for the meta, you're fine after that point. So I guess for an engagement question, what's the one thing that you like the most or dislike the most, or a combination of either one or both when it came to playing this game if you have played it? Anyways, if you made it this far, thanks for watching. Have a good one.